This is Musical Talk.
Musical Talk.
The UK's independent musical theatre podcast.
Musical Talk, the UK independent musical theatre podcast.
Musical Talk rolls on into its 501st episode. Merrily it rolls along.
Ho ho.
Hello, Thos Ribbits.
Hello, Nicholas Hudson.
How are you?
I'm very well. I can't believe we've done half a millennium.
I can't believe we're 501 years old.
It does feel like that sometimes. You merely look the first 25 of that, and the other
Yes.
476 is my doing.
I actually saw a talk recently given by Barry Humphries.
Oh, yes.
At the wonderful China Exchange, which is a kind of hidden gem of talks that you can go to for £5. And he said, I'm nearly 70, you know. Sadly, I'm for the other side of 70.
Yes, it's disappearing into the distance.
Yes,
Funny, I once saw an interview that Elaine Page did with the late, great Elaine Stritch. And she said that, certainly in Britain, everyone's so excited by age, she's always referred to as the 80-year-old performer or the 83-year-old Elaine Stritch.
Elaine Stritch or Elaine Page?
Elaine Stritch was the one who said that she was always referred to as old, but it was Elaine Page who was interviewing her. There were as many Elaines as you could find.
Got a fun, varied episode coming up today.
Magazine format, Nicholas,
Yes.
like it used to be.
Like it used to be in the olden days when we were young and when I had hair.
Sorry, boo-hoo.
This part of my notes is labelled as intro, so hello Thos, how are you?
I'm very fine. It's nice to be here on this side of 500, on this side of our first 10 years.
Yes, and what better way than to introduce a new voice to the podcast? A lovely friend of mine and fan of Musical Talk, Antonia Gentili, is going to be joining us for a couple of episodes coming up. This one in particular, she and I had a discussion about the role that women played in the development from opera to musical theatre and beyond, which is quite interesting, I think.
Oh, I think that's absolutely interesting. And of course, when one thinks of opera, one actually thinks of female singers almost before one thinks of male singers.
Yes.
Does one do that with musical theatre?
We'll find out. Here we go. Antonia Gentili, welcome to Musical Talk, your first episode. How does that feel as a massive fan of the podcast?
Slightly surreal.
Good. Feminism in life is a big thing at the moment, and especially in musicals, especially with the remake of Beauty and the Beast coming out, which we will see in the future. We recently discovered an article in a British newspaper called The Guardian that talked about the term feministing, which is an interesting...
The article wasn't by Emma Watson, it was about
No,
Emma Watson,
it was about something that she said, wasn't it?
It's about, the new the new film of Beauty and the Beast that's coming out in March. Sort of changes they've made to her character to make her more sort of modern and more appealing to feminists, as a lot of the old fairy tale characters that are often...
They're often conceived as quite waif-like and weak, aren't they?
So, a lot of the Disney films are based on these fairy tale characters that are, often considered to be, like you say, weak or girly. Not there's anything wrong with being girly, but they're
I enjoy being a girl, as the song says.
You know the stereotype I'm talking about. You think about Cinderella,
often needing a man to come and help her to get her to be in a happier place,
or them being seen as an object of desire by a man, but nothing more than that.
Yeah. A couple of weeks ago, we had a discussion about Frozen specifically, and how a lot of people are saying, it's the most groundbreaking film of all time because it's finally nice to see something where the princess doesn't need a prince in order to achieve her life's goals and stuff like that. You and I came to the agreement that Frozen, whilst it does present that message, and we love the fact that it does, it doesn't really hold true in the fact that it's not like the first Disney film to ever do this, is it?
No, I don't think so. I think it's had a lot of particular attention recently because feminism, like you said, it's the fourth wave of feminism. A lot of people are looking at films like that now. And I think there's a big thing, parents at the moment are looking a lot to, when they sit their child down in front of something, I think they want to send them the right message. So with Frozen, I think it was great because there are two female characters in it that are central, and it's great that it's a commercial success and that a film that's centred around two females could be interesting to everybody. And
do you think Frozen veered on feminazi because every male character in Frozen is a bit of an idiot or bad or...
Well, there are. In order for the love at first sight thing to go wrong, the prince has to end up being a baddie, and obviously Anna realizes it was a bit silly to be
Spoilers.
or something. Yeah, sorry. The thing about the article that I didn't like was the fact that we have to remember these are fairy tales. All these Disney films are based on fairy tales, and the point of a fairy tale is that it has a moral message, and their characters have to be simple. The message has to be clear. So often the characters are simplified, and they're not realistic. They're magical and entertaining. So I think we have to be careful, because I think if we're going to change fairy tales so much, that we're going to lose that magical aspect. And if we make them too real, I think we're going to ruin it potentially for the children. But at the same time, there's nothing wrong with having a strong female in that too. So maybe that's where Frozen gets the balance right. Frozen gets the balance right because it's quite magical, and at the same time, there are some strong female characters in it. But to say up until about 2013, when the film came out, that there were no strong Disney female characters up until that point, I disagree with, actually. And the article mentioned Belle as not being a particularly strong female character. And I do actually kind of disagree with that. She's strong. She's very intelligent. She's bookish. When there's the scene with her with this is in the original Disney film, with her dad. He's saying, "Can you hand me this tool? Can you hand me that tool?" She knows what all the tools are. She can.
Also the scene with her and Gaston when he says, "How can you read this? There's no pictures."
And she's like, "You're an idiot." But also, it's not just about intellectual qualities. She stands up to the beast. And I think she is quite a strong character. Just because she falls in love at the end doesn't make her not strong. I have a problem with this, actually. I think just because you're in love doesn't mean that you're a weak character. I just think sometimes the way that fairy tales show this is simplified, and obviously nuanced characters are not always able to be...
Enchanted almost takes the, no pun intended, takes the mickey a bit and says... "We just met, we're in love," and it never works out.
They kind of did that as well. So it's similar in Frozen. They did that in Enchanted, which came out a few years before. There are lots of strong female characters. Mulan, for example. Mulan's a strong character. She goes to war in her dad's place. I think some people have an issue with the fact that she has to dress up as a man to do this. But in the end, she, says, "Well, I'm going to go help them anyway." And she's dressed as a woman at this point, and she gets the credit for being a woman saving the day. I think something we have to remember is it's not just the female characters that are, portrayed in a certain way. The male characters are. There's a big thing at the moment about gender and the fact that a man can't be seen to be sensitive, and that a woman has to be seen to be weak and not strong. I don't think a lot of the hero characters are particularly developed either. They've got a lot of the male characters. They're not.
Well, the prince in Cinderella and Snow White, respectively, was just a mannequin that appeared.
Yeah,
looked like he'd been melted in the sunlight and made of wax. And he just said, "I'm here to save you."
Yeah,
that's how he spoke.
And and there's this whole thing at the moment which is really important about men being told to man up and and that you have to be strong and blah 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 blah, and you can't be sensitive and emotional, and they don't really show that in male characters in Disney films either. So, and it's because the characters aren't necessarily lifelike because they're in this fairy tale magical realm. Well, so it's not just the female characters.
Boy. If we were to go back earlier into the Disney canon, they've always done wonderful female characters.
Well, they have. I think some people would have an issue with that because not all the characters are particularly strong. I mean, if you look back at some of the early cartoons, like Cinderella and
Snow White
and things, they are very...
She needs 7 men to look after her.
They're stereotypical and, but they're based on fairy tales. They're magical fairy tales.
They're also based on the time in which the social stuff was happening at the time the films were made.
Yeah. So I think we have to look at them with, that in mind.
You're of an opera background, so your knowledge of musical theatre goes way back beyond mine. So how have female roles, in a nutshell, changed from the beginning of stories being told on stage through song?
It's difficult.
Short answer, please.
It's difficult to put it in a nutshell. A lot of what we see in musical theatre probably comes from opera because that is the references that a lot of composers have to, and people, because that's what they had to go on previously. And if you look at a lot of the female characters in opera, this is an all the female characters in opera. There's some great characters in opera that aren't like this, but there are lots of characters. For example, Madame Butterfly, she kills herself at the end of the opera because the relationship doesn't go the way that she wanted it to.
That's a bit of an overreaction, isn't it? I bet she sings a really long song as she's doing it, doesn't she?
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a style of opera. But the characters, for example, die of a terrible disease or like consumption in La Traviata, and that's written by a male composer, and he inflicts that on all his female characters. So there is that aspect of operas are often written by men, and not particularly nice things happen to the female characters. But there is that historical.
Doesn't mean they're all misogynists, though, does it?
No, and then there is
musical theatre. The audiences I generally notice in the West End are largely female. There's a lot of boyfriends or husbands that are probably, I don't want to say dragged along, but it's always kind of a. Do you think as well that it seemed as a kind of female hobby
I think
here?
So. I think one of the arguments is that it's written for females by men. Mm-hmm. This is something I think we've discussed before. There aren't many female creatives working in theatre. I can't really think of many female composers working in theatre.
There are more female creators than female composers, that's for sure.
Yeah.
It's interesting how composing is, dare I say, a manly job?
Well, again, it's historical. Yeah. So looking at the background that I come from, if you look in the classical canon, there aren't many. There are a few, but there aren't many.
Aren't many being one of them, one of the female.
I mean, there's Fanny Mendelssohn, Clara Schumann.
That's it.
Well, if you go a bit further back, there are a couple, but they're not really there. They're often attached to other...
The more famous male counterparts.
Yeah, exactly. You probably find that if you look back in the historical classical canon, you won't find many. And I think that's kind of influenced it today, because I kind of think that people can't find their inspiration from places. There aren't many classical composers that are female now today. So if you haven't got any inspiration, then you're not really going to do that job.
The musical theatre world, there's obviously I've paused to think here. Janine Tesori, who did Shrek and that thing about a washing machine, I can't remember, and Nell Benjamin, but she is married to Lawrence O'Keefe, the composer of Legally Blonde and Bat Boy.
That doesn't mean that she's no longer valid, it's just she happens to be married to him.
Kristen Anderson Lopez, who's married to Bobby Lopez, so it's a kind of Clara Schumann Mendelssohn syndrome, isn't it?
Well, I think that you're probably right.
Yeah.
But you end up...
There is a musical on Broadway called Waitress at the moment, and I don't know the composer's name, but I know it's a pop singer. And when we're starting to see more of that coming, this is a whole episode entirely about pop songwriters trying to do musicals.
Like Dolly Parton.
Yeah. They're starting to creep in, but only really if they're associated with the male composer or if it's from a pop background.
Yeah, not necessarily, but I think that seems to be what we're seeing.
So what are you hoping to see out of Beauty and the Beast, the new film? We've seen the trailer.
The slight issue I had with the article that we talked about, and this is the whole reason we're having this conversation, is that they're kind of actively looking for things to feminize. What was the word that
Feminist. Feminista.
I don't think that was it. What was it?
Whatever, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter what it was. I'm all for female stories being told. I'm all for, finding stories that, showcase what females can,
But females have always been the bigger roles in musical theatre. You look at another thing I want to discuss eventually on Musical Talk is the gay community and why they, as men who are attracted to men, why they are so attracted to female performers, such as Barbra Streisand and Liza Minnelli and Judy Garland and all those, the big Broadway divas, Patti LuPone, and they're all interested in the female parts. There were huge female roles. Mama Rose, for example, who's a very strong character. Baby June, who sort of stands up for herself, but the other daughter, whose name escapes me, Louise, but is a really strong character, I think, to rise above the dragon that is Mama Rose.
Yeah, I would say, though, if we're looking at this through a feminist lens, the majority of female characters in musical theatre are usually attached to a love interest. Now, I've said in this podcast, I don't see why you can't be a strong woman if you're in love with someone, but generally, it tends to be that the love kind of consumes them and then they lose their minds, which I don't quite understand. So usually, the female characters are either not, there are lots of them, but they're not either very developed, or they're not talking about something that isn't love for a change. More modern musicals tend to have more developed female roles. You look at Elphaba in Wicked and Galinda in Wicked. There's a musical there that has centred around 2 females, which is amazing.
Way before Frozen was.
Yeah, and it's a commercial success and proves to you can have a musical that's centred around 2 women. That is something that's going to interest everyone. And Mamma Mia is another one. Lots of central characters are all female. There's one male character, Sophie's boyfriend. Legally Blonde. Now, I think some people probably have a few problems with Legally Blonde and wouldn't particularly call it a feminist musical. Even though Elle wins the court case at the end, she wins it
based on her knowledge of hair products.
But at the same time, I think what they're trying to say is, look, Elle is clever. She knows about the law. She's not stupid.
She's not like the whole musical. That's why one of the reasons I love it is it's a lot more intelligent than it appears to be on its first. The whole, as Thos said yonks ago in his review, the first song is absolutely excruciating to listen to. Because it's meant to be.
Yeah.
It's meant to be this kind of SoCal, oh my God, you guys, and that whole thing over and over. Yeah. And the score shoves that sound out the window and starts again after that song. And Elle becomes a very, very intelligent woman.
So the musical is not as annoying or unintelligent as people think it is, just like Elle's character. It reflects her character. She is smart, and she proves you can be smart and you can have good knowledge of hair. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. Sister Act as well.
Sister Act,
which is touring the country at the moment.
You know how much I love Sister Act. Sister Act is one of my favourites. There is a love story in Sister Act, but it's not the central focus of the story. And at the end of the story, very much like Frozen, Dolores is saved by the love of her sisters, just like Anna is saved by the love of her sister Elsa in Frozen. There seems to be more modern musicals that are centred around females that tend to deal with subjects that are not about love, which is great.
What's interesting is did the film of Sister Act have the love plot?
Oh gosh, I've seen it so many times.
I don't think it did.
No, I don't think it did. No, I don't think it did. I can't really remember.
To possibly add to the sentimental factor for the musical, they had to add the Eddie policeman love subplot.
Yeah, but I don't think that was to necessarily develop Dolores's plot. I think it was to develop the other character, to give him more to do in the opera. Opera? Oh, goodness.
Opera. Sister Act the Opera, now playing at the Covent Garden Opera House.
To give him more to do in the musical.
Phantom. Les Mis. Let's talk about the stalwarts here.
Well, they're the big commercial successes in London. They're the tourist
Not
traps.
so much Cats.
No. There are female cats, but the thing is, you look at Phantom and Les Mis, they are the big commercial successes in London, and written by men, both productions written by men. And I would say that those musicals are more based around the male characters. And I think a big argument about the fact that there are, like you said, there are lots of female characters in musicals, but they seem to be replaced by the Valjeans and the Javert and the Phantoms. People seem to be slightly more interested in those characters than the female characters. So even though there are characters like Mama Rose, I think when people think of musical theatre, don't necessarily think of the female characters first. They probably think of the Valjeans and the Phantoms, because they're the big commercial successes in London at the moment. In Les Mis, I think the women characters have a pretty bad time of it. I mean, there's Fantine's character.
One of them's dead within 10 minutes.
Exactly. Cosette.
She's a lucky one.
She's the lucky one, yeah. I would say not a particularly developed character. She doesn't really have an awful lot to sing or do, and she just has to kind of be a bit lovesick during it.
You could say she has the biggest song. No, I'm getting my character. Who's the Susan Boyle song?
Oh, that's Fantine.
Fantine. So
Eponine has a big song in the second half.
Yeah, but it's not I Dreamed a Dream.
But again, she dies. But then you have to look. It's based on a source material by Victor Hugo. They're taking that story.
It's certainly interesting. The other big kind of the Cameron Mackintosh quartet is we got Les Mis, Phantom, Cats. So I want to end on Miss Saigon.
Yeah.
Going back to the opera basis of Madame Butterfly, how has Miss Saigon changed? Is that at all different?
The story is very similar. Kim is very similar to Butterfly's character. She has the same character traits. She's very much in love and believes that he will come back. And all the way through Madame Butterfly is saying he will come back, and her maid is going, he's not going to come back, but she's convinced he's going to come back. And obviously there's the character of the other woman, which is exactly the same as in Butterfly. There's other woman, Ellen in Miss Saigon, and Kate Pinkerton in Madame Butterfly. The female characters are pretty much taken out of the opera and put into a new musical. They're very, very similar. obviously elements of the story have to change because it's set in a different historical period.
In our last episode of Musical Talk, you heard that, and you heard Andy Edwards' review of Miss Saigon. You didn't quite agree with him, did you?
Oh, not on the changes. I didn't like the changes because, like Andy had seen the previous production, I'd seen the tour. It was a very long time ago now. I didn't like the changes to Ellen's character. I thought it was hugely weakened because the new song they've written for her, I think is it called Maybe?
Maybe,
Someone
don't know.
can maybe correct me on that. I didn't think there was anything wrong with now that I've seen her. And I think that the only reason they changed the song was to make the audience sympathise with her more and to make her a more likeable character. I do have a massive issue with this because I don't see why she has to be likeable in a way. I mean, to be honest, we should sympathise with Ellen anyway. I think the audience, from the audience's point of view, we have Kim in the story, and it's Kim's story. We root for Kim. We really want things to go well for Kim, and then this other woman comes in, and I think with the audience, they kind of, it's the other woman, and they kind of get a little bit annoyed. But if you put yourself in Ellen's shoes in the musical, she doesn't know that Chris has had this other relationship, and he's never been honest and straight with her. So if you think about it and you actually understand where that character's coming from, then you would understand that she'd sing all the things that she sang about in the previous song that she had. And I just thought the new song, it was just really weak. It didn't seem realistic to me. I thought that, she was singing about things that she didn't necessarily, were completely different to the other piece, and I don't think you would think if you were in that situation. Yeah, I just didn't think it was realistic or just very good, to be honest. The character before there was nothing wrong with it, but I think social attitudes have changed. And
I think that's the theme we're seeing here.
Yeah.
And I hope the future holds well for, wonderful female roles in musicals without having to rely on the man to back her up. And we look forward to seeing Beauty and the Beast, and hopefully we'll have some content on that to share with you. And Tonya, we'll have you on again in a couple of weeks to discuss how vocal styles have changed over the last 7,000 years. Everything from caveman grunting to to other more modern stuff. But thank you very much for joining me on your first episode of Musical Talk and my 501st episode of Musical Talk.
Congratulations.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you very much. Good night. So there we go, that was that discussion I had. At the time of recording, I have not yet seen School of Rock, but by the time this episode goes out, I will have seen School of Rock. There's a bit of a time machine thing going on in this episode.
Is there a reason you're telling me this, Nick?
Yes.
Or is this just therapy? I'm guessing we're going to be talking about School of Rock.
Yes. School of Rock is the new Andrew Lloyd Webber musical that is playing at the New London Theatre, a theatre I've only been to twice in my life. Have you been before?
I have. I'm pretty certain that I saw the late Stephen Gately playing Joseph in his amazing Technicolor Doodah there. The inside venue aspect of it, the auditorium, because it's a 1970s theatre, I think, is actually not too bad. It's only got comfortable seats, or so I remember.
And legroom as well, probably.
Yes. It is an absolutely revolting, brutalist concrete building outside, yes. It's not a building that anyone will ever look at twice. I think Warhorse was there for a while as well. So it's been doing Speech Mark's straight drama for some time.
I've never seen Warhorse, and I probably should have seen it, but I saw Gone with the Wind there, and of course I saw...
So you could have combined the two and had a horse with wind.
Yes. I also saw Cats there many, many, many years ago. What's interesting is that when Cats went to Broadway, it opened at the Winter Garden Theatre, and that is also where School of Rock opened on Broadway. So it's interesting that that Andrew is putting the show back into the same style of theatre that Cats went into originally. I want to talk to you a bit about School of Rock because we chatted about it with Dominic McChesney. Do you remember? About a year ago.
I do, very much indeed. This is the musical adaptation of the film.
Yes.
Now, I must tell you, in my head, there are 3 musical films which have similar enough names for me to get them muddled up. They are We Will Rock You, which I know is the Queen musical. Then there is Rock of Ages, which in my head is the rip-off Queen musical.
And it's also a film.
And then there's School of Rock, which I think is the comedy with Jack Black, is that right?
Yes, correct.
Now, I'm going to be honest with you. All 3 of them are a closed book to me. But let me tell you a little bit about what I do know from School of Rock. Did you enjoy that?
Yes.
I know very little about School of
quick.
Rock. So I know it's a film. And I remember from our previous conversations that it was talk about Andrew Lloyd Webber writing a new score for it, or writing a score for it.
He wasn't meant to do it originally, though. He was kind of... shoehorned it in. He they originally just wanted to do the film on stage as a jukebox musical, and Andrew was going to produce it. But then he thought, well, why don't we, put some new songs in it? And the interesting thing is, it's music by Lord Andrew Lloyd Webber, book by Lord Julian Fellows. And this is some American kind of rock and roll musical, which I think is hilarious. But what Julian Fellows has done is he has added a lot of the kids' backstories into it. So he's
a character man, though, isn't he?
He's adapted the film script and kept a lot of the funny lines, I would guess, from the film, and made it more of an archy story for theatre and to have musical theatre book moments.
He's not the lyricist, though, is he?
No, Glenn Slater is a lyricist.
Right, that's interesting. I think that's actually quite a strong set of production people, in my view, because Julian, as I know him, as I once met him,
yes.
is a great writer in his own way, and he's certainly a great character writer. Gosford Park is a masterfully written film. Of course, we know he did good work fleshing out the characters with Mary Poppins. And
the TV series of Gosford Park, Downton Abbey, is also quite successful.
And I was going to move on to his television career. And of course, he has, I think he has more works in the pipeline as well.
Titanic as well, he adapted. Wind in the Willows, of course, with Stars and Drew, that's also playing right now.
So he knows his onions, but he's a good adapter and he's a good character man. So that bodes well. And as you say, it seems to me that when you're taking characters from a film, particularly a film which is a bit of a send-up, they aren't going to be tremendously well written. And so it's actually quite nice that you're telling me they're adding a backstory, but they're trying to round them out. They're presumably trying to make them into real characters, so you have genuine sympathy, because that intimacy on stage requires that in a way that you don't on a film. In a film, you can be passively enjoying what you're seeing, but you aren't necessarily connecting with the actors, are you? Whereas on stage, you've got to. And of course, with Andrew Lloyd Webber, he started off in some senses as a rock musician, or at least a rock composer. I do mean rock in the musical theatre sense of rock.
Rock opera.
Yes. But funnily enough, when we went to see Love Never Dies a good few years ago now, very little of that has stayed with me. But funnily enough, the one song that's really stayed with me is when we go into the sort of the workshop of the Phantom as he, in America on Coney Island or wherever he is. There's a kind of machine that makes...
Peace obviously didn't stay with you.
Isn't that right? Isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
I said whatever it is. Yes.
Well,
it was Coney Island, correct.
Thank you very much indeed. You see, I'm much better off telling you the historic meaning of the word coney, which of course is rabbit. Did you know? Instead of being able to tell you the ins and outs of Love Never Dies, even though I saw it. But the thing that stayed with me, a positive thing that stayed with me, was the machine that played rock music. I can't remember too much about it, but I remember it being, in my view, of a step above to the rest of the score, and I don't mean that negatively. Yes, exactly.
Different timbre.
Yes, and he still does have skills in those areas. So actually, rock score by Andrew Lloyd Webber, I think, would be actually quite an interesting thing to hear. I do hope it's a successful piece in that sense.
I recorded a review about it in the future, and now, for you listener in the past, here is my review of School of Rock, playing at the New London Theatre. Yes, so I saw School of Rock last night at the New London Theatre, and overall it was a really, really enjoyable evening. There's always something very heartwarming about seeing incredibly talented children on stage, whether it's in Billy Elliot or Matilda or Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and now in School of Rock. For those of you who haven't seen the film that it's based on, it's about a layabout rock star wannabe who is fired from his kind of 80s hair metal band and is suddenly offered the chance to impersonate his best friend that he lives with and become a supply teacher or dep teacher at a very, very posh boarding school called Horace Preparatory School. And from then on, the chaos ensues, where he suddenly discovers that the kids have an innate talent for music, and he decides to instill the message of rock into the children. It's as predictable as you want it to be, as is the film. I really, really loved the film when I saw it all those years ago, and I remember sitting there thinking, you know, this really belongs on stage. The show is incredibly enjoyable. The energy is when the kids are jumping up and down on the stage, the floor, the floor of the stalls is rocking, literally. It's a very, very heartwarming story, very touching. The stage set is pretty simple. It's not a big budget show. Well, it probably is, but we don't really see it. The stage set has almost the feeling of a rock concert about it, which is highly appropriate. Lots of metal frames everywhere, some bits and pieces that slide on and off. Throughout the piece, Dewey, The Layabout, talks about his great big rock song dream that he has. This is from the film, and he talks about one spotlight shines on me, and there's lasers and a sea of fog, envelops his ankles, whatever the words are. And yet we never see that moment. It's all about the songs that the kids do, which is fine. It's incredibly enjoyable. But I wanted to see a big rock moment with lasers and that kind of real Black Sabbath Spinal Tap thing that that whole era of rock is kind of based on, and what the show makes huge reference to. But anyway, we don't see that, but that's fine. We do open with a song done by the first band that Dewey is in. I didn't spot it, but my friend with whom I saw the show did, and he left incredibly annoyed that it's essentially a complete rip-off of I've Been in Love Too Long by Marty Webb, written by Don Black and Andrew Lloyd Webber. I left the theatre hearing a lot of people saying this, and I quote 2 young theatre students I heard saying, "Come on, Sir Andrew, write your own music." There is a lovely song in the show, I think, called If Only You Would Listen, which is a kind of anthemic ballad that the kids sing to their parents and later on to Dewey, which is a rip-off of a song from Chess. This is the issue I've always had with Andrew Lloyd Webber. He is a huge supporter of theatre in this country, and now we've seen of education. And, we love his violin scheme that he's doing, where he's giving schools free violins. And School of Rock is available for free for schools to do in this country, which is brilliant, and we applaud that. But I still sat there and thought, this is the most enjoyable Andrew Lloyd Webber musical I've seen in a very, very long time. I also sat there thinking, this is incredibly like Sister Act. Ignoring the fact that Glenn Slater also did the lyrics for Sister Act, there's a song in it called You're in the Band, which is the exact same structure as Raise Your Voice from Sister Act. What I would like the musical to do is to have more montages, because there are some very, very long scenes which might start with a song and then have dialogue and then have another song. The opening, for example, could have been a wonderful 10-minute montage of little scenes, little vignettes, little bits of music to bring us to the point where the show comes alive, which is when Dewey is in the classroom teaching the kids. We don't get that. My favourite line in the whole show is when Dewey is getting the kids to sing some of the songs they like, and one kid sings Tomorrow from Annie, and then another kid sings Memory, to which Dewey says, no, stop, I never want to hear that song in this building again, which is incredibly funny because both in New York and in London it's playing in the theatre where Cats played. Little bit of a joke for the musical theatre fans, but whatever. I cannot fault the kids in this show, as every single review has said. The kids in this show, you've never really seen anything like it. Yes, we've seen kids act in Matilda, we've seen kids dance in Billy Elliot, but to see a tiny little girl play the bass guitar, and the bass guitar is bigger than the little girl was, it's just incredibly heartwarming. The talent of these kids, all 39 of them that are employed over the run of this musical, is it's just astonishing. It really, really is. It's worth to see it. The role of Dewey Finn was played by David Finn, which is quite funny. I think he was a bit off the night I went. They must be incredibly tired from all the previews and the press nights and all that kind of stuff. But he was a bit sharp at points, but gave an incredibly joyous performance. Very, very talented on the guitar as well. Florence Andrews, who plays Rosalie Mullins, the principal of the school, was very charming. She had a big rock song. Well, no, it wasn't a big rock song. It was a big song that had a bit of rock in it. And I wanted it to have a much bigger ending because it kind of teetered down at the end and the audience didn't know whether to clap or not, but when they did, they gave her the huge round of applause that she deserved. A wonderful cast of kids, wonderful cast of grown-ups. There's a grown-up band, as they're called, stage left, up in the box, which is nice to see. Andrew Lloyd Webber opens the show. There's an announcement where he says, yes, the kids do play their own instruments, and just to prove that, come the later moments of the show when the kids are rocking out on stage, the band literally stand over the rails of the box and watch the kids just to prove that these kids are rocking and rolling, and they are absolutely astonishing. Go and see it for the kids, please. You will not regret it. Thus, it's been a joy to sit with you again and record episodes like we did in the olden days.
It is an absolute pleasure. I do think it's rather cheeky of you to have actually sat down with me when, in fact, you're just the waiter. Now, where is my aperitif?
I don't know where your pair of teeth are. I think they're
Been punched down my throat.
in your jaw somewhere.
Yes.
We have lots of things coming up in the future.
Oh,
don't
we do, both of us.
You've recently teased that in your episode. I'm very interested to hear your Sandy Wilson
What, impression or interview?
Or both. And
Yes, recently rediscovered from my masterful archive, so I'm very
Yes.
pleased to have found that again.
And I have an interview with Tony Hatch, which
Good
I shall be
Lord.
releasing soon.
I
which
think
I
that will
lost
be
and then
fascinating.
found again about his
Oh.
rock Christmas musical, Rock Nativity, that he did with David Wood, who's also in the episode. So we'll be having that episode going out as well.
They sound fantastic. So that sounds a really interesting interview.
Yes. Lots of things coming up on Musical Talk. We have a lovely new website. Well, it's not that new. It's our website at musicaltalkpodcast.weebly.com. We are on Twitter at twitter.com/musicaltalk, at Facebook at facebook.com/musicaltalk. Thos is on Twitter
He is.
at musicaltalkthos.
He is. Amazing.
And we look forward to hearing a lot more from you and me and Tonya and other people in the future of Musical Talk. It's all very exciting.
Well, I think it is, yes. I do hope you'll continue to listen with us, everyone.
Goodbye.
Farewell.
Happy to say.
Forgive me, in a comedy in particular.
No, I will not forgive you. I never forgive you every time you ask for forgiveness.
Well, okay then. I'll just have to live with that disappointment. I'm over it now.